Good afternoon. Welcome to STEAM Camp. My name is Miss Adrienne. I'm the children's librarian at the Foster City Library, usually, which is one of the San Mateo County libraries. And today I'm going to be presenting a program about making linoleum block prints. This is something that I like to do for fun, and since the A in STEAM is for art, I thought I could share one of the things that I do to make art with all of our STEAM campers. If you haven't had a chance to register for summer learning this year, go ahead and check out summerlearners.org to participate. You can get a reading log and record how much you read this summer and get entered to win a $1,000 college scholarship. So don't forget to go and sign up. So today we're going to talk about a lot of different ways you can make block prints. I like to make linoleum block prints mostly, but there are ways that you can do it that are really easy and safe for children. I just don't happen to have some of those materials. Mostly the thing that you need is like a foam foam plate or a foam, like a leftover container, the square ones that are made out of foam, which I just don't happen to have that with me here at home. So I'm going to show you a couple of other types of materials, but I'm going to address how you would do that using foam, especially if you happen to have foam plates at home. This would be a really good way to do it with young children. Okay, so linoleum block prints, they're a lot like using stamps. Has anyone out there ever used a wooden rubber stamp? Yeah, I have for sure. I use rubber stamps all the time at the library. We used to, back in the day, stamp people's due dates on their books, but we don't do that anymore. But yeah, lots of times we use rubber stamps, and making block prints is a lot like using rubber stamps. In fact, it's almost like making your very own rubber stamp. So the first thing that you want to do when you're going to make a linoleum block print is you want to find an image that you want to print. This can be something that you find in a magazine, or it can be something maybe that you draw yourself. So for example, I like to make my Christmas cards. So I drew a number of years ago this picture of berries in a leaf with ice hanging off of them. And I thought, oh, that would make a very nice Christmas card. So you can make something that you draw into a linoleum block print. You can also, trace something. Let me see if I have anything in here. Yeah. So I also made block prints for the tables at my wedding, so that each table had a number so people knew where they were going to sit. So you can see this, in this one, I traced the number 1 onto my paper. So first thing you'll want to do is you'll either want to peruse through some magazines, find a nice picture you like, or you'll want to draw something that you think you could make into a linoleum block print. The second step is you're going to take that image and you're going to transfer it to tracing paper. So this is tracing paper. As you can see, it's you can see through it. It's not completely opaque. How many of you have used tracing paper before? Yeah, lots of people have used tracing paper. You can use it for lots of things. But in linoleum block printing, what it's used for is transferring your image from your original, maybe the image you found in a magazine or the picture you drew, to the linoleum block or the piece of foam that you're going to be using for printing. So you can see with my cherries, what I did was I took this piece of, it's kind of stuck on here. I took this piece of tracing paper and I overlaid it on top of my drawing. I put it on top of my drawing. And then I used a pencil. This is important that you want to use a pencil. You don't want to use a pen or a marker. You want to use a pencil because pencils are made out of graphite, and they, you know, when you rub them, part of the graphite might come off, and that's what we want. That's what we want to happen. So you can see I overlaid my tracing paper, traced my cherries and my leaf, and then now I have a separate pencil outline of my original colored pencil drawing. So after you've traced your image, I'll show you another really simple image I did at one point. So these also went on. Yeah, so here I drew some really simple little pictures here, and then you can see I made a starfish, was one of them. I wanted to make some things that were really easy, so then I traced my little starfish. This was the one that I thought I liked the best. I traced my little starfish onto my tracing paper. Okay, so oh, and another thing you'll want to do is when you do put your tracing paper, like if you take a blank tracing paper, right, and you put it over what you want to trace, like your starfish, you're going to want to take your tape and put some tape on it so that it doesn't move when you're tracing. That just is like a little pro tip, because otherwise sometimes the paper will move and it's you know, it doesn't look totally right. So taping it down is a really good way to eliminate that issue. All right. So once you've got your image traced in pencil on your tracing paper, this is how you're going to transfer this image to whatever you're using to make your print, your linoleum block, your rubber for rubber stamp, or your foam, piece of foam. So let me talk a little bit about linoleum. So linoleum blocks you can buy at the art store. This is one piece of linoleum. You can see it's not thick. It's kind of soft. It is not hard like wood. It's slightly soft. You can also buy, so you can buy the plain linoleum, and then you can also buy a prefabricated block. This is a piece of linoleum that's been mounted on wood already for you. And you can buy these pre-made in a variety of sizes. So those are really cool too. You can also buy rubber, just like they used to make rubber stamps. So this is really neat for doing, I think, small things like little rubber stamps. I prefer to use this. By making something big that's almost like a full picture, I think the linoleum is slightly better for that because it's not, you know, it's less flexible, is what I would say. So this is just a piece of rubber, and you can cut it with scissors and then use some tools to carve it, which I'll show you a little later. What you'll need for the foam to carve, it's super simple. You just need a pencil or some other type of blunt object, like the bottom side of a paintbrush will work for foam too. So the foam is much softer than either of these materials, and it's much easier to carve. That's why you just need something like a pencil, and you're just going to trace over top of your image. So 3 different types of things. Some people also make prints using wood blocks. I don't do that, so I'm not going to talk about that, but that is another way of making prints. So here's some ones that I've carved in the past. So here's a flower. This is made out of that rubber. I've made this one. This is my starfish. You can see that. That's my starfish that we looked at earlier. This one's just a triangle. I used it for making Christmas trees on a card one year. And you can see this one, I actually mounted to a little piece of wood using wood glue. So that's something you can do, but you don't necessarily have to. Like these ones I didn't mount and they turned out fine when I did use them to print. This one is part of a tree. So I used it to make a print of a tree. I did the leaves of the tree with this circle, and then I printed the branches using this rubber stamp. And then this is a linoleum block print I made a number of years ago. It is the emblem of a music festival that I like to go to. So it is completely made of linoleum, and I mounted it on this round piece of wood. With something this big, you probably want to mount it, because if you didn't, it would be, I think, somewhat unwieldy, difficult to make a print out of. So those are some different blocks or rubber stamps that I made. So let's move on. So how do we transfer the image that we have traced onto our printing material? So let's say I'm going to use my rubber because it's slightly easier to see. So then I'm going to take my trace paper, and I'm going to just put it on top of a spot wherever I have enough, you know, ideally you'd probably have a bigger piece of rubber than this, but you can see, so then it's going to be right there. You would also want to tape this down again. So tape it down onto whatever you're going to transfer it to. And then what you're going to do is take something, I like to use a wooden spoon usually, but this is a wooden spatula and it should do the trick. So I'm going to take it and rub my tracing paper in sort of like circular motions on top of my traced starfish using the wooden spatula or the wooden spoon. So I'm just going in little circular motions, and what's going to happen is the graphite from my pencil is going to slightly rub off, and it's going to transfer my image onto my piece of rubber. This also works on linoleum. This does not work on foam. So for foam, you would not have to do this process. All you would have to do would be tape it down, and then using your pencil, go over the outline one more time on top of your foam, and that will press into the foam and transfer your image onto the foam. Okay, and you can see from rubbing, just from rubbing, I have transferred my image over onto the rubber so that I could make a rubber stamp out of this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to carve it out afterwards. The same process of transfer using the tracing paper works for linoleum blocks also. So those are all the linoleum block and the rubber. You would want to use that transfer technique. With the foam, like a foam plate or a foam leftover container, you don't have to do that. You can just trace the outside of your image, and then it's already on your paper in a relief, which is really nice. With foam block, with the foam, that's actually all you have to do. You could also like go back on your foam, and remember, anything that is pressed in on your foam is not going to be part of your print. So that's always hard to remember. You think sometimes like that, that when you carve something out, the carved parts are the parts that are going to be visible when you use your rubber stamp, but they're not. It's actually the opposite. So it's what's called a relief print. So the things that you carve out, or on foam, the things that you trace and make, you know, use pressure to trace that, those are the parts that will be not visible when you go to print. So just try to keep that in mind. I know when I first started, it was hard for me to visualize that. And I made a lot of mistakes, but that's how you learn, growth mindset. So it's okay to make mistakes, especially in this, because it's just for fun. So I've got my starfish transferred here, and then let's go ahead and talk a little bit about how we carve. So for carving rubber or carving linoleum, older kids, and I'm talking like older, like teenagers, because I have definitely poked myself with these carving tools before. Little kids should not use these. So I have a number of different gouges is what they're called, and I have a base for my gouges. They are the small V-shaped gouge, a large V-shaped gouge. I have a large U-shaped gouge, and then I have a, I think this is an even larger V-shaped gouge. So you use these gouges, different ones, to make different types of markings on your rubber or linoleum. And I'll show you how that works. So I also have something really cool that I somewhere saw that you should make. I probably saw it in a book because I'm a librarian and I read books about crafts. But so this was something that I made to help me. It's for carving. It's just a piece of plywood with two small pieces, one on either side on opposite edges that are screwed in. And what it does is it fits up against the edge of a table and it doesn't move. And then the other edge, this one, is going to hold my piece of rubber or my piece of linoleum in place so that I can carve, and that way I can carve and my hand won't be there and I theoretically will not poke myself. That's really important. Do not poke yourself. So I'm gonna put in my very small V-shaped gouge. This is the gouge you're gonna use for making very tiny little lines. You can see it's a very tiny little carving instrument. And this way, I'm just gonna do the star in the middle of my, my starfish here. But you can see as I'm carving, my hands are both back here. None of them are up here, so that if I lose grip here, I'm not gonna poke myself with this gouge. That is what you do not want to do, and it hurts, so don't do it. Okay, so I'm just gonna carve my little star here. And as I carve, some material comes up, and I just take it out of my gouge. And just set it to the side. And this makes very tiny little fine gouges. So I just carved a little tiny star in the center of that. I don't know if you can see it so well. Yeah, so that's the tiny gouge. And then I'll demonstrate using the really big U gouge. The big U gouge is good if you need to remove a lot of material. Ooh. Oh my goodness, okay. So my gouge just fell apart, but it's okay. I'll put it back together. Okay, so here's my big U-shaped gouge. See, this one's really big. So I'm going to insert that and tighten it. And this is good for removing lots of material, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to carve some of the actual starfish here. And now you see how I'm pointing back? Don't do that. Move your material so that way you're not going to poke yourself. So don't do what Miss Adrienne does. That is not cool. Make sure you never have your hand in front of the gouge. Older kids. Younger kids, make sure you never touch the gouge. So I'm just going to demonstrate, but you can see how I removed a lot of material really fast. And that's what the big U gouge is really good for. All right, so that's carving. And then what you'll want to do is, after you carve your block, you're going to want to print it. And I'll show you some prints that I have done in the past, and that so you can see what it means that it's a relief. So here's a print of a roller skate. You can see that the parts that I carved out of my block are the parts that are white here. The parts that are black are the parts that I left. Here's another one. This one's a different color, so let's use that. This is a gnome. And so in this print, there was no material in this whole area that's white. And the part that was still left in the print was the part that appears red. So it's hard, I think, to get your mind around the fact that this is a relief print, but after you do it a couple times and you make some test prints, you sort of figure it out. So here's a print of what this one looks like when it is printed, right? So that's what it looks like. You can see the part on this linoleum that is black is the part that printed on this paper. And you'll want to get some nice, if you're doing a real print that you want to, you know, maybe make your Christmas cards or something like that, you'll want to get some nice quality paper. You can go to the art store and get nice printing paper. It works because it's a little bit textured and it's a little bit thick. So let's go ahead and do a nice little print on one of these, and then we'll be all done for today. So to print, what you're gonna need is some ink. I have a variety of inks that I will show you. So these two are water-based block printing ink from Speedball. This is what I recommend. I've also printed with oil-based block printing ink. I would not recommend this. Definitely not for children because it's oil-based and it needs to be cleaned with turpentine. So if you're in the art store, make sure you read the labels and get the water-based rather than the oil-based. The oil-based also takes forever to dry. So just, you know, if you accidentally pick this up, don't use it. The water-based is the way to go. Then what you want to use to spread out your ink, you could also use paint, especially if you're using a piece of foam that you've already, transferred your image on by tracing. You're going to use these are called brayers. I always have two, one for spreading my ink out, so this is going to be dirty and have ink on it, and the other one I use for rubbing the back of my block to make sure that it really prints evenly. So let's do a quick little print here. I think let's do the starfish. So I'm gonna try and use, I haven't used this in a long time. I'm gonna spread my ink out. I hope this ink's still all right. I haven't used it in years, but I normally use a small piece of glass to roll my ink out on. You could roll your ink out on anything though. So like I also have, this is a piece of wood that has plastic on the outside. This would be really good too, especially for young children who you wouldn't want to use this with. So let's use this piece of wood. I'm going to use a light, just a little drop of my water-based block printing ink here. Okay, I've got a little bit there. Then I'm just going to use my brayer to spread it out so that it's really thin. You don't want to get too much ink on your block. So I've got a little bit of blue ink on here, and I'm going to use that to transfer it to my starfish. So the ink is on the brayer, and now I'm using the brayer to transfer the ink onto the starfish. Okay, so I've got a nice blue inked starfish here, and I'm going to print it on my paper with my Folk Fest logo. So I'm going to take my little rubber stamp, put it on the paper, make sure you don't move it afterwards. I'm going to use my other brayer to evenly apply pressure on the back. And that's it. Now I'm going to pull up my rubber stamp, and we'll see I made a nice little starfish there. So that is a basic introduction to how you would go about making a linoleum block print. I definitely recommend that children under the age of like 13 use the foam core rather than using the carving instruments. Older children could give it a go using the carving instruments with lots of supervision. And you know, also an adult might want to just do the carving and the child can do the rest of the process. So those are some other interesting ways to go about making a print together as a family. So I hope that you learned something about linoleum block printing today, and tune in next time for more STEAM programming from San Mateo County Libraries. Bye-bye.